Good morning. My name is Rebecca Rolfe, and it is my pleasure to serve as the Executive Director here at the San Francisco LGBT Community Center. Today is a historic day for many reasons, not the least of which is that this marks 1 year since the shooting at the nightclub Pulse in Orlando, Florida, in which we saw the loss of 49 lives in a tragic example of what happens when homophobia and transphobia and racism and xenophobia and religious intolerance come together and took the lives of so many people in our community. Unfortunately, we see those kinds of incidents throughout the country as well as here at home in San Francisco. But today we're also able to celebrate an investment that this city is making in people who have come to San Francisco seeking safety and seeking sanctuary from those very same challenges and those very same experiences around the country. And we're here to talk about what happens when young people, particularly young LGBT, queer and questioning young people, come to San Francisco seeking a place to be themselves and seeking safety. And I can think of no better way for us to celebrate that and acknowledge that investment than here at the center, where our mission is to connect our diverse communities to the resources and the opportunities that they need to not just survive, but to thrive. Our youth program serves young homeless people who are either come to San Francisco and either have a hard time finding housing or are unstably housed, who are really seeking the basic elements to build a life of safety and security for themselves. And that includes food, that includes clothing, shelter, employment, healthcare, mental health resources, and all of which are provided by the center and our very strong partners, including we'll be hearing from Cheryl Adams from Larkin Street Youth Services this morning, and how the different partners come together to really provide the amazing resources for our young people. To kick us off this morning, we're going to hear from Mayor Ed Lee, who in many ways needs no introduction, but I think many of us are familiar with the incredible work he's done as a civic leader in San Francisco, really leading San Francisco through some very, very challenging times, really understanding what it means to really give life to the San Francisco values of inclusion, of diversity, of respect, of tolerance, of understanding what it means to run a city like this that brings together so many different people with so many different challenges into one enormous whole. I think his lifetime of commitment to civil rights, to inclusion, to being a housing activist really helped set him up for his tremendous role in that. And I really thank him for his leadership over the last many decades in different roles, including his current role and the leadership he has provided as mayor of this city to really bring us together and to be able to celebrate this kind of investment in making San Francisco an inclusive and amazing place for our young people and for all the folks who call San Francisco home. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Edwin Lee.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for welcoming us to your house. Everybody, welcome to the LGBT Center of San Francisco. During this budget season, I actually get to have the privilege of being informed by a number of supervisors about the needs in the community. And those are great conversations because you always have a period of time where I'm not the only one thinking about stuff. There's 11 supervisors that are thinking about their community, about the city. So I had the privilege of sitting down with Supervisor Jeff Sheehy and talking about his first full year budget on what his priorities are and what he wanted to do in the community of District 8, and we talked about what was happening on the streets. And clearly, every supervisors now have the opportunity to talk to me about homeless centers, navigation centers, and in particular, Supervisor Sheehy has emphasized youth and how this center has been a welcoming center for so many generations. We're lucky to have a center where I don't know if any other city has a LGBT center where it's owned by the community, the whole building. And so you can really have programs that really benefit the entire community, the transgender community. In fact, this is Teresa Sparks' office where she advises me on transgendered issues, and she made her home, her office, right here in the center, a welcoming center. Well, it was through Supervisor Sheehy's observations, efforts, his engagement, where we felt there had to be a lot more needed to focus on some of the youth that he sees arriving into the city, in the Castro, in the Haight, and all over the city, and making sure that we're not allowing them to just live on the streets, that the numbers are increasing, and we want them to feel both welcome but also safe. So during that conversation, we realized that the hours of welcoming could be increased here at the center, that we can help with a strong support of rent subsidies that are causing some of our youth to end up on the streets, to have outreach hours that are increased, have some meals, more meals than they have here, because food is always an attraction to young people, but also keeping it welcome and open. And so teaming up with Larkin Street, teaming up with people that will help keep the center open and safe as a welcoming place was the right recipe. So I want to thank Supervisor Sheehy for not only pointing that out, but being an advocate for young people here. We happen to be a strong advocate for our children and family in the city already. In fact, our budget has some $22 million in next fiscal year aimed at children and families in San Francisco. And because of Barbara Garcia's work at the health department and our homeless department, working with human services, we also, and children, youth, and family, we also have an increase to $23 million in the second year of our budget. So it's in the context that we're making these investments to make sure we're taking care of our children and family and ending homelessness for as many people as possible. But with young people, we want to also capture them where they're coming in. And we feel that if we can expand the hours here, make outreach center even more welcoming with additional food and rent subsidies, that combination that we've tried to inform us will allow us to spend another $1.5 million to increase those services at a time when I think youth need to be attracted to areas where they can be safe, where they can get the services that they need. This is what we're doing with this additional money. It is, again, a reflection of the priorities of the supervisor that's helping me figure out everything from navigation centers to how to make sure that we're taking care of people on our streets, getting them off the streets, reducing harm on our streets is really going to be the theme of this next 2 years budget. And we're going to work with everybody, but we have to do it the way that we have been informed. And I want to thank Jeff Sheehy and Jeff Kaczynski, the two Jeffs that are working together with me to do it the right way, that we're not moving people from corner to corner. We're providing them with support services and transforming their ability to be stronger and be able to get the housing, stay in their housing, also move on and get jobs. This center, by the way, does a great job in connecting people with jobs as well. Again, I say, and I want to compliment Rebecca that on the year of the Pulse massacre, we want to do this for our community. I also say this is the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love. And so I hearken back to our openness as a society, as a city, and that we all work together to make sure everybody is welcome in this city, and then doing those things that support people, not to make differences and create differences, but to create a collaboration amongst all of our different agencies, from our police department, our health department, our human services department, our LGBT center, our transgender advocacy, and again, on the advocacy of supervisors like Jeff Sheehy. I just want to say thank you for your leadership. Thank you for bringing this up in front to our attention, and thank you for working with Jeff Kaczynski as we tackle short-term and long-term homelessness challenges in our city. Appreciate that. All right.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lee. Next, we will hear from Supervisor Jeff Sheehy, who has been a tireless advocate for the entire LGBT community, particularly on issues of HIV and AIDS. He comes to his current role after many, many years of activism in the community, many years of advocacy in the community, has really stepped into such a strong leadership role representing LGBTQ issues at the supervisorial level, and really also looking at the very deep issues facing our young people, many of whom come to San Francisco seeking a safe place to be. Between 40 and 50% of the young people on our streets identify as LGBT, and a very high percentage of them are either HIV positive or are at risk of becoming HIV positive in the near future. So he's really taken this on, I think, as a key issue, and we really appreciate his leadership and guidance in bringing this issue up and in creating some very strong tools to address it. Please join me in welcoming Supervisor Jeff Sheehy.
Thank you, Rebecca. Can you guys hear me on this? I think the mic's a little low, but maybe I'll move it up a bit. Again, could we maybe have a moment of silence for the victims of the Pulse tragedy here 1 year later? Now, I think what we're doing today is one of the best ways that we can honor their memory, which is looking out for the young people from our community, and not just from our community, but from all communities who come to San Francisco and end up on our streets. I took this on because as I was walking around the Castro, and I noticed that a great many of the homeless people that were in the neighborhood were young people. And I myself came here in 1988, almost 30 years ago, when I couch surfed. I didn't have any money. Was a bike messenger. So I really identified, and from Texas, with the need to find a haven, to find a place to be free. It's re-emphasized to me. I had a hearing on youth homelessness, and a trans kid from Kentucky spoke. They had been living in Kentucky with their mother. Their mother was very accepting, but one day she came to them and she said, "You need to leave. The death threats that you're getting, they frighten me. I worry for your life." And what I realized then was that the last 8 years have really been tremendous for our community. Same-sex marriage nationally, LGBT folks in the military accepted, the Obama administration supporting trans kids in schools. And so young people all across the country were encouraged to be their authentic selves. Unfortunately, with the election of our current president, people who had viewed these positive changes in a negative light, who'd spent the last 8 years seething, every day becoming angrier and angrier over the changes that were happening, suddenly felt empowered, vindicated. And now, as we see all across the country, people who they perceive to be different, people who they don't accept as being part of our America, they act out against. And what this has done has put a bullseye on young people who are different for whatever reason, whether it's LGBTQ or they're just free spirits. But across the country, these young people are at risk. And like the young person who came to my hearing, they're coming to San Francisco. And what we have now is an internal refugee problem. And I think as a sanctuary city, as a city that, one of the things I was very proud of was the way we stood up for our Muslim brothers and sisters right after I was appointed by Mayor Lee. We also have to be a haven for refugees from Trump America. So I am very, very grateful to Mayor Lee. This is not an issue that gave him 1 second pause. He immediately saw the need and jumped into action. Jeff Kaczynski has been such a great person to work with. I'm so grateful for his support in these efforts. And just to kind of talk very specifically about what we're doing. So we've got $1 million in increased funding to support San Francisco's homeless youth. So $350,000 for expanded outreach services, and that will be provided by Larkin Street. Oh, we're sorry. And that investment will fund an outreach coordinator stationed at Larkin Street. It will pay for new resources and increased staffing for outreach teams that interact with young people dealing with homelessness, and their training is very specific to that age group, and we know that their developmental issues, because they're still growing, their brains are still maturing, that the specialization in the outreach teams that has been developed at Larkin Street will be absolutely critical to helping them get off the streets. They'll speak with the young people, offer them support and counseling, and help them move off the streets. Thank you, Rebecca. The LGBT Center is such a phenomenal resource, and there's this kind of myth that's getting out there that we're only going to work with LGBTQ folks, but the reality is everyone is welcome, and they're expanding their opening hours from 22 hours to 36 hours a week. Daytime services will be added on Saturdays. Opening hours will be increased an additional 2 hours, so we'll be open from 2 to 6. And I think this is great. We're going to expand the meal program from 1 night a week to 5 nights a week so that the young people have a place to go and get food. And then finally, and I think this is really a great piece of the package, is $360,000 for rental subsidies that will allow almost an additional 100 young people to receive housing support. And this is such a great way to get people off the streets. If they're newly homeless, then that can help them before they get caught up in all of the disorder, which can include substance use, which can include physical and sexual violence, before they're traumatized. But the other thing it can do is it can pull people off the top of the ladder who are in transitional housing, and that opens up spots in supportive housing so we can get them moving either directly off the streets or open up space at the first stage of the ladder so that they can get off the streets that way. So again, I'm grateful to everyone who's here today. I'm grateful for their support for this issue, and let's get these kids a safe, comfortable place to be. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Jeff Kosinski, who has spent many years in the city and county working on issues of homelessness from a variety of different perspectives, including very intensive work working with nonprofits as a nonprofit service provider to really address the needs of homeless folks here in San Francisco. And then recently has taken on this somewhat daunting task and a new role within the city and county of really leading the city's efforts to address homelessness. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Jeff Kosinski.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. I want to thank the center for their leadership and for being part of this initiative and creating such a wonderful safe space for young people in our community. I'd like to thank Mayor Lee for his leadership around the issues of homelessness and housing. He's done so much for the city in both of these spaces, and I'm grateful and honored that he selected me to serve in this new department. And then special thanks to Supervisor Jeff Sheehy for challenging us to do better on this issue of youth homelessness. And we need to do better on this issue. Most homeless people in the United States today are second wave baby boomers who, when they were young people, they were facing a challenging housing market. They were facing a challenging job market, and they were hit by 2 big recessions in the late 70s and in the early 80s. And if you think that sounds familiar, that sounds like what we're facing today, you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, the demographics and the trajectory around homelessness around the country, we're seeing history repeat itself. There's a growing number of young people experiencing homelessness in the United States. And in San Francisco, young people represent about 20% of the homeless population. And if we are ever going to solve this problem of homelessness, we really need to focus on young people who are homeless and unstably housed. And very grateful also to the many organizations who work on this issue, and want to acknowledge my colleagues in the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, Ali Schlegeter and Cindy Ward, who have really been leaders in this field for many years, who know as much about this issue as almost anyone in San Francisco. And if you have questions or want to know what's been happening and what we could do to make things better, those 2 individuals are the people to talk to. I think what we're doing today, what Supervisor Sheehy, who has been a fierce advocate around this issue and has worked with the mayor and with my staff to make this $1 million investment, I think it's a start. I think it adds to the $2.9 million HUD grant that my staff worked so hard to get that's focused on youth homelessness. San Francisco, there were 10 out of 150 applicants around the country that received this. San Francisco was one of them. And so I think that now we've got some momentum going. And I look forward to seeing continued reductions in youth homelessness in San Francisco. But more importantly, I look forward to our work to help individuals who are housing unstable and who are homeless to be their best and most authentic selves. Because we can look at this from a systemic perspective, and we certainly do in order to drive these numbers down. But at the end of the day, we're talking about young people at the beginning of their lives with so much potential ahead of them. And initiatives like this are going to help harness their strengths and their assets and their youth and their energy to help them to flourish and to live the dreams and to be the people that they want to become. It's not going to happen on the streets. And this initiative is going to help so many people get off the streets and become their best and most authentic selves. So thank you all for being here today, and look forward to continue to working with all of you to end youth homelessness here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Before I welcome our final speaker, I also just want to acknowledge some other folks who have been tremendously instrumental in bringing this work together and really looking at how we address and serve young people here in San Francisco. And those include the senior advisor to the mayor, Teresa Sparks, who we are happy to call, who we're happy to bring into the center family and who has her offices here. Barbara Garcia, who's done an amazing job leading a very challenging role to address the health needs of San Franciscans, and also Andrea Shorter, former board member of the center, commissioner who will also be at the Commission on the Status of Women, who will also be helping to coordinate efforts. So with that, I'm going to introduce our final speaker, which is the amazing Cheryl Adams, who not only leads Larkin Street Youth Services, which is one of the largest service providers for transitional age youth and young folks here in San Francisco, and it's an amazing organization that does amazing work, which I think we're going to hear about, but I think also importantly has been a real advocate for the community and a real advocate and supporter of how we come together as nonprofit organizations and as city services to really better serve the community. And I really thank and appreciate and acknowledge her efforts, which rise far and above the simple title of being executive director at Larkin Street, to really look at the leadership role that she's played throughout the city. So please join me in welcoming Cheryl Adams.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was a really nice introduction, and I could say all the same things about you. I am really thrilled to be here today to talk about this initiative and to really thank the mayor and Supervisor Sheehy and Jeff and Barbara and everybody behind me who has led these efforts to really look at how can we improve the services and resources for young people who are experiencing homelessness, and how can we really specifically develop creative approaches to addressing the needs of LGBTQ youth. We started the Castro Youth Housing Program in partnership with the Center and Lyric and a number of other organizations in 2004, really specifically to be able to address the needs of LGBT young people. And the need has only grown for all of the reasons that Supervisor Sheehy so eloquently spoke to. And so it is critical that we work together as a community to increase services, outreach, engagement, opportunities for food, for a place to be safe, to come into this wonderful, welcoming community, and be able to connect with young people, offer them hope, and for both immediate stability and safety, as well as hope for their future. Larkin Street will be adding outreach support, engagement support, connections to employment, as well as connections to the large scale set of services that we have within our current offerings within Larkin Street Youth Services, and working with all of our community partners. We could not have done it without the leadership of the supervisor and of the mayor and of Jeff and everybody else, and we are ecstatic to be able to expand services to this very important population of young people, and as it furthers our ultimate goal of ending youth homelessness. So thank you all for being here.
And it concludes our program for today. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you for coming to the center. Thank you for the amazing team that has made all this possible. Please, again, a round of appreciation for Mayor Lee and his amazing team.